Awesome. Great. All right. So I'm very excited that you guys are all here. Like I've said, my name is Lindsay Cuyava. I'm the artistic director of Re Theater. Re Theater is an online theater education and consulting company. And our whole goal is to help educators use their theater program as a way to help their students better understand and explore their world while also using their program as a tool to help heal their communities, both which now, ironically, we're in a time when we really need the arts to help us out. So we're hoping with these brainstorms, we're helping educators figure out ways to heal their community through their programs both now and once we are able to resume life in some manner, hopefully sooner than later. And so I'm really excited that you guys are here. And so this week I am joined by one of my absolutely favorite artists to work with. And she's one of the mentors at Re Theater. So her name is Kate Jaeger. I will let Kate introduce herself, but I am just really thankful. I think you guys are gonna get so many great ideas from Kate. And so yeah, Kate, do you wanna introduce yourself and tell us who you all are?
I will. Hi, everyone. And hi, Ellen. I see you. I know Ellen. That's very exciting. And I look forward to getting to meet the rest of you. My name is Kate Jaeger, and I am a teaching artist, director, actor here in Seattle, Washington. And I've been a teaching artist for a little over 20 years now, and have worked with Lindsay in various capacities here with Re Theater as a mentor, and also have worked with her as my dramaturg when I've been directing shows, and we've taught together. So we go back quite a ways and have a very similar way of looking at theater. And today we're really going to focus on sort of the two different aspects of character development and monologue work. Specifically with character work, we'll be talking about the outside in approach, how you take the physical, the vocal, and turn that into really complex and specific character work, and also the inside out. And that is doing the text work and beat work, using those wonderful active words to help us score out our scenes. So we'll be looking at those two different ways and brainstorming ideas to how to do this in a digital format, which is very exciting because all of a sudden we are all digital providers in ways that we haven't been before, perhaps. So it'll be very exciting. Scott's just joined us. Hi, Scott.
And your baby, if anybody needs to see a baby, there he is.
A baby makes everything better.
Yes.
So I'm very excited. I'm very passionate about character work as an actor. I am a character actor who's really dedicated to my entire career to complex characters that have really specific choices, but also a lot of heart assigned to them. So looking at characters outside in and inside out is really the way that you can make sure that you can integrate those two things. Because I think one without the other leaves you a little bit like paddling in the water with just one arm rather than paddling with two arms. So you've got your character work on the outside and your character work on the inside, and together those are going to make you a much stronger swimmer than really focusing just on one. So I'm excited for today. Yay! That was a lot.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it was perfect. Sorry, one second. As some of you guys know, the link didn't work, so I'm keeping an eye also on my email because a couple people have said that the link didn't work. So, but yeah, no, I'm really excited for this. As Kate said, I love that analogy where you're talking about using both arms to swim. I think that you and I balance each other out well on that because sometimes I get very much into my inside out frame of mind. So that's kind of where we're going to go ahead and start. So just as we're going through, if you're watching live, go ahead. You can always put questions that you have. So if anybody is coming in and you are like, hey, I am here because I have this specific question, or I'm working on trying to figure this out with my students, that would be great. Just throw it up over in the chat. What Kate and I are going to do, we're just going to both talk for like 5 or 10 minutes each, hopefully 5 minutes-ish. And we're just going to share some like high level overview ideas of where we both start when doing scene work and character analysis and all of that. And then from there, we'll open it up and we'll start to do some brainstorming. For those of you that weren't here last week, oh my gosh, the amount of like ideas for lessons that came out of this was unbelievable. So I'm very excited. So Kate, do you want to explain outside in first?
I will, yeah. When I'm teaching character work outside in, I really like to focus on sort of 3 different pillars, for lack of a better word: physicality, vocal, and also point of view. I think each of those is a great point of view. Can also be tied into emotion or emotion, the way that the character views the world around them, what their ethos is. So starting with physicality, I really tend to do a lot of exercises that a lot of students have done, but I look at them in a different point of view, a different framework, and that is walks around the room, leading with your heart, or do you like how I pointed at my head and said heart? But leading with your head, leading with your heart, leading with, a more grounded character might lead with their feet or their knees, and going through very specifically and talking about each character and as they move through the world, how that ties into their point of view. So if they're forehead led, let's say, there's going to be a lot of different ways that character may view the world. It could be that their forehead is out and their eyes are down because they don't want to interact with the people around them. Or it could be that their forehead is up, leading into the world because they're full of curiosity. It could be that their forehead is out because they're always looking for danger. There's a lot of different possibilities for each of those. Same with their nose. They could be leading with their nose because they're looking down on the world around them, sort of looking through their nose. Or it could be that their nose is their curiosity center. Just more like how a dog would lead into the world, trying to sniff out excitement or danger, as it were. So I use a lot of different leading points, and oftentimes I'll make them try 3 different positions for each one, and lead them through, as I'm guiding them, the different points of view and emotional centers that might bring. Because my biggest thing about character work is that there's no one right and true answer. There are so many possibilities. And I try in my work to get out of the idea of choices being right or wrong, and instead choices being stronger for the story we're trying to tell. So what they might be doing might be perfect if we're looking through the lens of the play at a slightly different point of view, but I may need to steer them in a different direction because that's not the story we're telling. But I really try to get away from, no, that's the wrong choice, and more about stronger choices that we can make. Another thing that I do with physicality that I love is animal work, which usually makes them groan and cry, but I love animal work because I like to take them from a 10 fully animal to a 0 fully human, and then do the dial in between to get them to that 50%, half human, half animal hybrid in an experiment gone terribly wrong. And as you go down sort of from 5 and get into that 20% area, 10% area, it is fascinating to see what they hold on to. And my point is always that we're not trying to look up and see Anna Karenina done by a bunch of baboons. If I'm looking up on the stage and I'm like, oh, look at all those peacocks up there, then we've done the experiment a little too fully. What we're looking at is, what do you hold on to? What is, if we're showing a lion, I'm going to hold on to the pride. If I'm playing a snake, I'm going to hold on to the suspicious fast movement. If I'm a bird, perhaps it's looking at the world with a curious tilt of the head. Again, it's just little tastes of what those animal characters are. I love it, and I think that it really can open up character work in a really unique way. So that's really rough overshot of physicality. Vocal, I think, is just as important in coming up with how your character speaks. I'm always telling my students that I want them to equally know how their character is similar to them, which is really important to them oftentimes, but also equally important is how that character is different from them. And especially when you're working with heightened language or really stylized work, finding the right vocal inflection and pattern is really important for that. So I do a lot of, I have them do a lot of listening in their off days to different vocal patterns, to different styles. I give them homework to watch different YouTube clips of the way different people speak. And oftentimes imitation is just the easiest way to do that, or to do circle work, or Zoom work, I guess I should say box work, as they imitate each other speaking and feel what it's like. If I'm imitating Lindsay, then I would have Ellen imitate me imitating Lindsay, and then Tanis would imitate Ellen imitating me imitating Lindsay, so that we're being really focused on hearing the differences and honoring those differences. We're not trying to change anything purposefully, but when it changes, we need to know why. And so talking about things like pitch, talking about things like speed, pronunciation, diction, all of those different volume. Are they a forceful speaker? Are they more timid? Is really helpful to get them out of just being themselves on stage. The final pillar that I use is point of view, which I think is fascinating. And really the simplest way to do that is to come up with, there's always those colloquialisms, those sayings like, every rose has a thorn, or if something can go wrong, it will. The glass is half empty, the glass is half full. I take no prisoners. Whatever that might be, to come up with what their character's defining point of view is. I like to think of it as sort of their quote on their Instagram, that one quote that they want to put out to the world. You know, take only, leave only footprints, take only pictures. That kind of having them brainstorm different ideas for what the general filter through which they look at the world, because they're going to approach each scene with that filter. So coming up with that ethos, as it were, is a really helpful thing as well. So that's kind of broad overstroke of really, really generalized ways of looking at character from the outside in. And then as we go forward after this, we'll start talking about different ways that we can integrate that online, our whole new frontier that we are all experiencing for the first time. Very exciting.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it, the very positive way. It'll be good. It'll be good. So yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions that are coming to the top of your head based on what Kate just said, go ahead. You can throw them over in the comments. We'll obviously circle back to them because I'm going to talk a little bit about inside out work. And then for those of you, we had quite a few people just recently join. If you want to pop over in the chat and let us know where you're from, that would be fantastic. I mean, I'm seeing people from all over, from both the places I live, both Seattle and New York. So that's kind of fun. So yeah, we'll keep trucking along. So as Kate like really did an amazing overview there of outside in work, which is lovely. So I'm going to talk about inside out. So as a dramaturg, I probably get too in the weeds about this. I will keep it short, but I am always happy for anybody that really wants to do inside out work with your students. Always please hit me up and we will totally chat about that. So inside out work, where I generally start is I'm very big into having the students not just answer those traditional character questions, like those 50 questions I think that we've probably all seen that float around on the internet, that are of varying usefulness, potentially, I guess is a good word to say. But so what I like to do is actually have the students start to get into the character's head and to start creating the world inside of their character's brain. So the ways that I do that, there's a couple of them. So I do start with those 50 questions. What I usually will do is have my students look at that and then select between 5 and 10 of these questions that they resonate with. I will also share out these questions for you all as we go through, and I will also slyly try to pull them up on my computer, or I'll do that later. But so coming up with these, looking and getting up really clear answers to these 5 to 10 questions, and then using that as the base from which they start to springboard. So I will have them do a couple of different exercises to further develop their character's world. One of them that I really enjoy working on them with is having them create a playlist for their character. You can have this be 2 different ways. One way that I think is like pretty common is we just are like, what is on your character's iPod? Which is also wonderful and lovely. Another one that I really enjoy having them do, especially at the beginning of the process, is to look at their character's arc throughout the show and create a playlist that brings them through the arc of their character throughout the show. So it's kind of like, what would be their, like, the backdrop to the show. It gets a little confusing if it's a musical, but like no songs from the musical. I personally, when I was an actor, was very unfocused and all over the place. And I would use this as well to help keep me focused in the rehearsal process, but also on stage. And so if you have any kids who are really squirrely, I would have this playlist and I would time it up so that, like, oh, I'm going to be off stage for 15 minutes here. What has to happen in my character's brain within this 15-minute period to get me to the next emotional or mental state when I go back on stage again. So that can be really helpful. For some kids, I also am all about like different learning styles. So for those people that are not going to like be auditory learners, I am really passionate about having students start to journal. And using that. I also, for like sensory learners, one of my favorite things is to have them create a character box that would, like, if your character was creating a memento box that they kept underneath their bed, what would be the different things that they would find inside of that box? Once we start to like, or also for those, some kids also are very into collages. In the last like 5 years, I haven't had as many students interested in doing like physical collages because I think everything is just so computerized now. But actually creating physical collages that then they can like explain their character through as well. The other thing that I like about all 4 of these exercises is these are things that don't have to just live off the stage as far as character development. They can actually be a part of your rehearsal process and as a part of your pre and post show rituals that your students are going through as well. And right now, we might as well introduce them to some ideas of like how they can cultivate those rituals themselves because we have the time. So once I start getting them to do these creative type of exercises to start to get into their character, the big thing that then I have them focus on, which is a little bit more research heavy, and so I like pairing the creative with research, is starting to look at the world of their character. So the 4 big things that I really think are important for students to look at is to look at when the time period of the show is set, right? That's pretty obvious, but not just like being like, it is 1970. There is disco music and America is at war. That's not really going to be super, like, that's like the bare minimum that we need, right? But actually looking at what was going on culturally, looking at social norms, and looking at where the character, so like if it's 1970, just as an example, right? Like having a better understanding of both the social norms and where it's like, where physically we are located, but looking at the 5 years before and after so that our students understand where their characters were coming from, especially if we are doing a show that is rooted in social change or disruption at all. It's important for them to know where these characters have been in the last 5 years, and then also looking towards where they will be 5 years after the timeline of our show ends, so that the kids can better understand the stakes and their role in the timeline of history better. Because like, I think Les Mis is a really great example. Kate and I had the opportunity to work on that together. And that show, like for first of all, so many people think that show is about the French Revolution, which it is absolutely not. And so when we first sat down, the kids thought like, oh, the French just lost the revolution. That's an oversimplification. These kids are very smart and wonderful. But that's not it. So like to understand, oh, this is actually the June Rebellion, that's like 12 years, 14 years before the actual Second French Revolution. So they better understood the stakes and what was happening within their world. That's really, really huge. Social norms is going to be really important also for them to start to explore and to understand through research. Using Les Mis again as an example, just because it's a very easily dramaturgical, well, not easy, but a good entry point into dramaturgy through Les Mis. We looked a lot at the class structure, which is something that means still you can argue exists in our world today, but it was much more clearly defined. And so for the students to understand like, oh, you're not like, I'm a rich person and you're a poor person, and I'm going to be like, oh, you're gross, and like not pay attention to you. There's a lot more dynamics that have to go into that and be able to be finessed. So what was the thought process? Like, was that person just a drunk on the side of the street? No, actually, like the aristocracy frowned upon drinking, and for these specific reasons. But the middle class didn't as much, but they also did for very different reasons than the aristocracy. And so like you can start to create these like really interesting moments on stage, hopefully without you having to tell every student at every moment what to do. So if they start to do this dramaturgical work. The other thing, so that's important for them understanding the world of their character. Also looking at what social movements were going on, or if there's any big like changes happening in society. So like with Newsies, it would be impossible. Well, that's not true. It would be a disservice to your students to direct Newsies without talking about the Industrial Revolution and about how unions came to be in child labor, right? Like that is the show that is Newsies. And so having them look at these specific parts of history that are going on is really helpful. The last part that I am really passionate about young people, especially when we're teaching students character development, is to have them look at what who wrote the play, when the play was written, and when the play takes place, and starting to look at the parallels between those things. Because it's really important, like if you're going to work on a Stephen Sondheim production, for example, Stephen Sondheim has so much to say, and he has so much to say at very different parts of his life. And if you just go and you're like, and now we will do Into the Woods with no exploration into like what's going on in the world and what he is saying about different things, it's easy to get lost in the story. So that is my, like, I talked far too fast, I'm sure, but that is where I will start with Inside Out character development, which I know is a little bit more dramaturgical than potentially normally what you would hear people doing for that. But that is where I start. Kate, you are somewhere on here, I know. But why don't we pause here and talk a little bit about, like, let's talk about like any ideas or questions that you guys are specifically looking at with character development, and then we can move on into scene work or that kind of stuff, like whenever that naturally happens, because it will.
And I was going to say, one of the things that unites Lindsay and I is also that deep work with the text, to look at how we're beating out the work, and looking at intentions and looking at, all of that gorgeous work that they hate to do, because it takes a lot of time, but we've got nothing but time now. So getting them into thinking about the text of their work as well is something that we can add into this conversation if anyone has questions about that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I would love to hear from you guys. What are you doing any work with your students right now around character development? If so, like, what are the different things you're teaching? You can unmute yourselves. Feel free and just start jumping in. That would be great.
Hi. So I'm actually working with my drama threes, which are primarily juniors. And before we were, sent home on March 13th, they started an assignment with Spoon River Anthology. And they were all given the book and asked to get a couple of monologues, actually, not just one. And I asked them to really like dig deep into the book and find characters that were connected. That's what I really love about Spoon River. And this is kind of my teaching them how to just use the text, the script, as their primary focus in research. So it was interesting. And, so right now, that's something I want to, I don't want to ignore it. Right now we're what we call in phase 2, which we're still a little bit of doing enrichment work with our students. But this is definitely something when I get into phase 3, which happens after spring break next week, that they're gonna be digging into that. So some of them said, I left my book in my locker, or I left my book in here or there. So luckily, Drama Notebook has all of the Spoon River Anthology monologues. So I was able to download that and give that to them in their Google Classroom. So yeah, just pretty much, I'm trying to teach them how to primarily use their text first and not worry about adding things from the outside, but what can you learn from your character just by what has been written by your playwright or by your author.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that I like that you're starting there, because one thing that I think happens is, and I will like say that is like a major, like a pitfall sometimes of when I start having them start to do more of their world of their character, is that they start to like make things up that then don't live with the text. So one thing Kate just mentioned, and you should jump in here, Kate, too, when we are doing like scene work with our students, as opposed to like creating a full show, I think we need to take a different approach. And so when I'm doing scene work specifically with them, there's, and I will send this out to all of you. It's actually on ReTheater's website. You can get it for free right now. But it goes through like breaking down the scene. And the first thing that I have my students look at is what are the given circumstances of that character. And with given circumstances, I'm pretty tough on that, in that there should only be 2 to 4 given circumstances for any character in any show ever. Because there are very few things that have to be exactly the same with every single person that plays that character. And so like, what are the pinpoints of that character that absolutely cannot change? And that's usually where I start with scene work, is to have them identify what that is, especially when doing something like Spoon River, right? And figuring out the monologues and how to get into those characters. Like, that's really important so they don't get too abstract or too vague in different ways. So I love that. How are your students enjoying working on Spoon River?
They actually are. It's interesting to see the combinations that they've come up with, because I've asked them to pick 2 monologues to then work on that. And, and I said, pick 2 that have spoken to you. I don't care if, it's a female character and you're a male or what have you. Pick something that's spoken to you. So it's interesting to see the combination of those characters. But no, I haven't had anyone fight me, because, they're like, this is really weird, Miss A, at first, but then they started reading and they're like, this is really cool. This is, just the whole concept of, what it's about. So.
I love that. Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to say, one of the things I love to do with that given circumstances is is really explore what we know about the character based on what the author tells us, versus what other characters tell us. So going through and looking for anytime the character is mentioned by another character, how are they perceived? How are they looked at? Are they described a certain way? Versus, you know, has the author given us any hints in, you know, even just stage directions to give us a helpful overview of who this character is, or in the character descriptions, but looking at it, and does it change is the big thing too, does the way the character, how they're referenced, does that ebb and flow as the course of it goes on?
That is I love that. That's really great. And I love seeing how that works with the students. Like when you've done that past, Kate, it's super cool to see for sure. How about anybody else? Is anybody else like doing similar work to what Laura just mentioned with using text and they're like finding monologues, or is anybody else doing anything similar?
Or different?
Or different? No?
Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
You can unmute yourself.
Okay. I was like, I want to jump in.
Yeah, great.
I really appreciate like what you guys are sharing, and I love that you're really differentiating between like, we've got the outside in, we've got the inside out, we want them both. How do we bring them both together? I think what I've found, and I think I'll share a little bit about what I'm doing, but maybe just challenges that I faced in the past couple of years working with high school students is, and both times that I've taught at like college prep schools. So the students are very smart, and I'm sure we all sort of deal with this in different ways. And so the physical part is much more challenging for them than the analysis. And the problem I find with a lot of like, not the dramaturgy as a thing, because that's obviously like key, it's essential, but they're really safe in that and they're really good at that. But one, you don't see it, they don't know how to transfer it into anything. So it's like, it's all stuck in their head. So I feel like often my challenge, and then again, especially now with this medium, it's like the one thing we had, which was this live energy, we don't have, and that was the thing they kind of needed more than anything else. And so that's something I feel like I love all this. I think it's amazing. And trying to work with like the challenge that I see, which is like getting the students, and I teach all girls right now, but getting them out of their heads. Cause it becomes very much like you said, Kate, which is like, it's not about being right. It's not about having the right answer, but when all of their other classes are really about like, there is an answer and I'm looking for you to bring the right answer, right? It's always kind of like, how can I please you? What is it you're looking for? And so trying to like, just through like warm-ups and games and all that stuff, break that. But also this is just a little side note, is I recently in San Francisco, Elevator Repair Service came and did the like 8-hour show Gats. And they read every word of The Great Gatsby. And it was crazy and amazing. And I was able to take a workshop with them, and they talked about their approach, like their dramaturgical approach, using all different types of source material. And the source material being like, we have a piece of text, so we're working directly from the text, but it's like totally calls upon the actor's imagination of like, oh my God, I feel like there's like a penguin or something, then like searching like, how do penguins move, and like finding videos and source material to then like pull. And Kate, as you said, I'm curious to hear more about like the voices, because I do think there's something fun, and there's a learning that I never really learned as a young actor, but in imitation, where it's like you start with that and then it becomes grounded and you learn to connect and make it something for the actor that can be nuanced and really build on, but as a way to just start as like a doorway in of like imitating a sound. And I'm curious, like, if you just look for random videos or how you find certain characters out there, we know they're out there, that might be inspiring to the students. But I know that was kind of just a lot of blah, but that's sort of what I've been thinking. I've been thinking a lot about, and I continue to be excited about just hearing what other teachers are doing because it is a whole new thing. It is just a whole new world. And even now, like talking to, you know, the 8 people or 7 people on here, just that element of like the sound stops, right? Because everyone's muted. It's so utterly challenging as a teacher and as an actor and a director, because you're always like feeding off that energy. So, you know, it's just accepting what this is, but it's I love hearing what other people are doing. And Spoon River, I remember doing that years ago and I loved it. It's really great you're doing that.
That
Yeah.
sounds great. Yeah.
Kate, do you have any ideas of like around like the imitation or the phonics or anything?
You know, the initial thing that I'm usually trying to do is just to educate ourselves or make ourselves aware that there are different ways of speaking and that exists, right? Because especially in school, it's really easy to be with your group of friends, and we all know that we end up talking like the people around us, and we have that way of communicating with each other. And just the awareness of the fact that there are different styles of speech, and that that can do with a lot, it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the region in which you grew up. It could be about whether your voice was heard or whether you had to struggle to find a voice. You know, I oftentimes talk to them about the fact that my voice is fairly lower in register. And that was because I think has a lot to do with the fact that I grew up with a lot of men and trying to find a way to make sure that my voice could be heard above the cacophony. I think I just sort of naturally developed a lower style of speaking that's a little more authoritative. And that is background for me. And when I'm on stage, I oftentimes play higher pitched characters, just because there's ways of I do a lot of example work, because I really like to imitate voices, vocal fry. So one is just education that it exists, and then digging deeper for why those changes might exist. And one of the things that they'll notice when they're going around and doing imitation is that your version of imitating Lindsay is going to be really different than my version of imitating Lindsay, and talking about the why of that, and the fact that we all have our own unique style of speaking. And I love looking, I use a lot of, movies are usually the easiest source, just because it's easier to find clips online oftentimes of movies than it is, although we are in a brand new world of theater being put on online in a way that I've never seen before, which is very exciting. LA Theater Works, if you're familiar with them, is a great online resource. And currently they are doing, you can send for a code if you're an educator, to get access to their amazing catalog, or at least a curated catalog of their work. If you're unfamiliar with them, if you've ever been late at night tooling through the different radio stations and hit upon an NPR station and thought, that sounds like a play, that's LA Theater Works. And they do, they record usually famous actors. Sometimes you learn new actors through the process, but recorded versions of entire plays. And so listening to different snippets of that can be really helpful. And again, right now they're offering a code, which I don't have, because I think it's an individual code for each educator.
To get that, or how do you?
What was that?
How do you find the code?
You have to send to them. I pulled it up. Let me just find it really quickly.
That seems amazing.
Yeah. If you go to, it's latw.org, latw.org. And then you can enroll right there on their website.
Oh, awesome. Great.
But I oftentimes like to use examples of characters that find their voice. So finding a movie character who is maybe more soft-spoken, and then there's that pivotal scene where suddenly they find their voice. So talking about the juxtaposition of the understated, hesitant, quiet, reserved voice that then finds its power is a great example, great way to talk about dynamics and about how the character can change, you know, their voice at the beginning, or simultaneously a real blowhard character who, you know, takes no prisoners, who suddenly learns to be affected by the people around them, who learns to be quiet, or who learns to listen for their first time. So I'm oftentimes just looking for those big dynamics. Oh, we lost Lindsay. That's exciting. I'm in charge now. I'm so excited. That's all I've ever wanted. So yeah, that's some examples. I wish that I had some clips for you, but there's just a plethora of character actors doing amazing work. Johnny Depp used to be my go-to. He's very controversial now, so it's a little more difficult, but no one at the time, you know, a few years ago, was doing that kind of intense work where every single character is completely different. And there are a lot of character actors who are somewhere perking up their ears going, me too, I also do that kind of work. So finding folks who live in that, you know, that world where you think, I've seen that person before. How have I seen that person before? Ah, I get it.
Yeah. If anybody has ideas, or like it's coming to your head, like, oh, this is a person who does character work, if you want to throw it over in the chat, so we have more examples. I mean, like Kate said, Johnny Depp is a great example, though slightly problematic, kind of, in today's world. Sorry, I had to. Somebody's knocking on my door, so I'm living with family again. It's a whole new experience that I forgot about. Okay. So then the other question, Tanis, too. And Nicole, I see your comment, so I will come back, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that too. But Tanis, are you doing any kind of, like, what are you doing for scene analysis with your students, or anybody, if you want to jump in here? Is anybody doing specific scene analysis with students, or are you just doing like general, like broad stroke, like script analysis and character development?
The main scene analysis that I've done is Uta Hagen.
Okay.
So I loved your ideas around music, around just more creative approaches as an addition. But those, like when you said the 50 questions, I was like, oh, I don't know if I know the 50 questions. I know like the 9 questions.
Yeah.
Like very Stanislavski based is like mainly what I know.
Okay, great. So do you, on that note, do you have them like beat out their scenes? So like they like have like their objectives are written down, their obstacle, that each level has a tactic assigned to it. Do you do
the tactics, exactly.
Oh, and that doesn't help them either.
It does help them.
Okay.
I think yes, it does help them. I think sometimes doing I'm thinking of like, you know, like the yes no game where you have like one person is yes and the other's no, and they're doing really active games where it's like they're naturally playing action, but they're not like, oh yeah, here I'm supposed to tantalize, or here I'm supposed to bully. Like I think sometimes that, because they're trying to remember what they did. But I think we know as actors and as like adults that like you do all that work and you let it all go, and then it's all kind of there. And I think part of it is just the challenge of class time and rehearsal time, and how much, you know, and part of it is like if they don't have a lot of extra time after school, or depending on what the schedule is, they're not sitting in the work like we know that they have to do for that to happen, is my guess.
No, absolutely. I'm just curious about that because like one of my, like when I go and do like residencies like around the country with different schools and we work through this stuff, one of the things that I find really helpful is doing that work. But if your students aren't able to take that off the page and then apply it, it totally gets in your head. One of the things that I do is specifically with my students when I'm working through that is, and does anybody else like is this helpful to talk through like specific script analysis? Is that things that like people like maybe, okay, I'll go very quick, but if you have questions, like this is like my jam and it's like my favorite thing in the world. So one of the things that I have them do is like, I have them like literally like, this is my to-do list. So this isn't a script, but like they will like mark everything out. So like they will like draw the beats out. They will write the objective on top of the beats. They'll identify what the obstacle is and then like write everything to the point that their script is totally marked up. Sometimes it's like, sometimes even like illegible in some ways. Like this would be a nightmare if you're using MTI. I also will like point that out because then you have to erase everything. But then make photocopies, which is not allowed, but you know, the things. Anyways, and then once they have it all written out, having them do it in hand quite a few times, but then having them like take pictures of it and recording themselves with them trying to do this both in hand and out of hand has been really, really helpful because they might think, oh, I'm trying to tantalize right here, but it's coming across super flat and not what you're intending. And so I was a student like your students, and I still am, like I get very scared when I have to like act things out and like make bold choices, but that has always been helpful is like that video recording and also overwriting everything so that I don't get stuck in my head saying like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing when that's just not the case. Can be helpful. The other thing too, if you're looking specifically at character development, and I'm only saying this specifically because I was like your students, like I just said, the most helpful exercise I ever had an acting instructor give me was doing a character study through the lens of an animal that my character was. So kind of mirroring what Kate said. And so I did, and now her name is going to escape me, the main secretary from How to Succeed in Business, that really trying. And I chose her to be a woodpecker. And so I had to create an entire 90-second character study of her. And it had to like be in 2 bits. So it had to be one that was an extreme, that like was very, very obvious that I was being a woodpecker. And then the other one had to be more of like what would be on stage. And like so Kate was talking about the dial, right? Like this is us at a 10 for being an animal. Let's dial it to a 5. And that was really helpful. And also something that I think all of us can do with our students right now, because Kate and I were talking before this, we're like, they're all making TikToks anyways. So if you do it in the increments that they know with TikTok, which is 15 seconds and 60 seconds, right? And have them doing this work, that could be a way to start to help your students like get out of that, like that awkward feeling, because there's still a lot of analysis that they can directly apply. So
awesome. Thank you.
And I oftentimes will have all of my students do the same monologue, but they're in charge of beating out and using tactics. And I use it to show how many possibilities there are. And then again, it gives us the opportunity to talk about things being stronger choices based on the story we're telling versus a right or a wrong choice. And it's actually fascinating how distinct and different, you know, there'll definitely be crossover in people's performances, but given their own devices, you know, there's going to be some really big changes. And oftentimes I'll layer onto that, then they have to add the world philosophy to their character. So define their world philosophy and also how they lead, what their focus is. So I'll have them enter into the scene, which, you know, here would be entering into the camera moment with their body part, and then using their worldview to really specify what those tactics are going to be.
I love that. Also, we have, so Nicole Perry is on the call, and she is like an expert, and I'm going to say it wrong, Nicole, so please correct me, but Hi. So, so Nicole has a lot of training. Is it Laban? Am I saying it? Laban?
Laban.
I'm never going to ever say it right in my entire life. But yeah, so, and you had said in the chat that, that it's a good way to like connect like movement and psychology. Do you want to just say a couple?
Yeah, so lots of actors are really familiar with the 8 efforts, punch, stab, flick, all of those from some Laban movement for actors training kind of thing. But there's way more than that to the work, and like modes of shape change happens to be one of my favorite things because it's all about how your form connects with either yourself or others in your environment, and if it's connecting with others in your environment just to make the connection or in order to engage with them or manipulate them. So there's a whole physicality around that. But then the efforts get broken down, and each section of effort, like weight, time, and space, are the ones we know from the 8 actions, right, have their own psychosocial correlation. So weight is about the investment of my mass, right? So how much am I really standing behind what I'm saying? Am I fully committed to it? So I have to activate some strong weight, or am I maybe a little wishy-washy? And so my weight's actually really passive and it's not engaged at all because I don't really care, right? So there's all of these psychosocial correlations to effort that, like, in real life, we would not want to always assign, because that would maybe have us misinterpret. It's totally biting me right now. She's a beast. Okay. But on stage works really, really great, and it helps make some archetypal character and movement choices. And I find, I used to teach in a college prep school too, and I find for really analytical, brainy people, it's a great way to dive into some physicality, applying what they already know of the braininess.
Nicole, are you doing any workshops online that dive into, because I know you're doing a bunch through Momentum.
I have some courses through Momentum, but I would totally be down to teaching something live.
Okay, well, let's keep in contact about that. If anybody, Nicole, can you throw over Momentum's information into the chat? Nicole has an amazing company. We have a lot in common, but she's like an expert in so many different things that we just don't do. And so go check her work out. She's gonna throw it over in the chat. But yeah, you do a lot of intimacy directing work, and this kind of work. So yeah, thank you. That's fantastic.
I think it's really fun, and it's something that actors already usually have a little bit of background with. So it's just like deepening it on. There's so much more to the work than the 8 efforts.
I love that.
Can I ask a quick question, Nicole?
Yeah.
Sure. Did you say investment of mass? MASS?
Yeah.
Okay. Mass. Awesome. I'm so curious. I've never heard that part of Laban, and that takes it to the next level in terms of, it kind of brings this like that can feel a little like la la. I mean, a slash is not la la. That's very specific, but that brings it even more, kind of adds to that. Like Lindsay's talking about the dramaturgical element.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I definitely came into the movement from the big brain side. I love the brain side of it and the analysis part. So I think it's really exciting.
That's cool. I'm fascinated. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
Wanted to add?
Oh, I wanted to just add, because we mentioned TikTok. I oftentimes use whatever is culturally like the most, the thing that everybody is doing as part of their dramaturgy and part of their character work. So I'll have them put together, you have to be careful about like encouraging them to do this in real true. So I'll have them do fake Instagram pages, not actually going online to create their own Insta pages. Although I have had, I did do a show where they did that on their own, which was intriguing and wonderful, and then terrible, and we had to talk about what we were putting out there into the world. But having them, using that idea of collage, like you said, Lindsay, collage means next to nothing to a lot of them now. But if you talk about what would their Pinterest page look like, or what would their Insta story look like, and having them take pictures throughout the day through the point of view of their character, or what would be the quotes that they would do, is really interesting. And I've been playing around with the idea of what would their TikTok look like. So what would Juliet's TikTok look like right after the dance where she's met Romeo for the first time? Like, what song would she choose? What movement would she have? So yeah, using sort of mass media, social media. And again, you have to have really specific talks about what that means and what parameters are, because they will get very excited about that and take that on to themselves. And you don't want to be responsible for necessarily what they're putting out there into the world. But doing it on a micro scale can be really interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm all about the social media weirdness, and I think it's super fun. And how we can get that in. Also, Jessica said over in the chat that Flipgrid is really good for quick videos. So if anybody is looking to do anything with that, check Flipgrid out. Jessica, can you tell us a little bit about Flipgrid for people that are not necessarily using that right now?
Yes. So I just discovered it myself like last week. So I can't speak on it like crazy, but I'm a science teacher and drama teacher. So Flipgrid, we started using it since we've been out of school, last 3 weeks. And what it does is it gives the kids to do like about a 15 to maybe up to 1 minute of a video, but you can only have it within your network. So which is good. So like only kids that are in your class can view your Flipgrid. You can choose, of course, to make it public if you want, but like mine, I just did a Flipgrid with my drama students because we can't do our show, obviously, as I'm sure some of you can't do, but I still want to keep the connection with them and like keep them in the loop. So I did a Flipgrid, and it's the first one they always make you do as an introduction. So it's nice. You could do it as your characters if you wanted to do it, or I had them introduce themselves as if they were still doing the show. You know, like this is me, I'm playing so-and-so, we were doing Beauty and the Beast. And like one of my students like put the roles, it made me cry, but one of the students put the roles and she was like, I'm Caitlin and I'm Belle and she's a senior and she's not gonna be able to do it, so fears, but it was a quick video. And then if I make it public, it'll be a nice thing to for them to have. They need to have these momentums, but like other teachers have been using it, like here's a discussion question of the day, and then you interpret, the kids have 20 seconds or 30 seconds to give their explanations. So we've been using it across all disciplines, which is nice. And then, like I said, you could keep it within your network. It goes with Google or a Microsoft account, or you can, like my kids, I don't know, they're not my students during the day. So I just made that one a public one. So anybody can click it. They just have to have the app downloaded. So it's good. You know, one kid did tell me she doesn't have the data for it because you don't know what the Wi-Fi situation is at home. But I said to another teacher, I said, I can guarantee you she's making TikTok videos because she was my choreographer. So she's home deaf, you know, so you never know. But yeah, Flipgrid is a new fun thing that I just discovered.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, what other thing, like what else can we help you guys with? Like, does anybody else have any other things that you're trying to troubleshoot with teaching online, whether it's in a traditional classroom setting or outside of it? Does anybody else have any other thoughts? You can unmute yourself or throw it over in the chat.
I guess one question that I have for everyone is, how do you encourage students to start thinking of the questions that we ask them during like rehearsals or scene work? Because my kids will go through and they'll mark their beats and they'll mark their tactics, but then I'll be asking them questions while they're rehearsing and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. So how do you guys encourage them to start like formulating those questions on their own?
That is a really good question, and I would love other people, like everybody, jump in on this if this is something that you've been doing. What I find the most helpful is actually having the students have to do like some directing and scene work from the other side, whether it's even just like in a very very informal setting, like if you're doing scene work with like having them get in groups of 2 to 3, like 2 to 3 scenes, depending on the size, and actually having the students be the directors in those moments. Like if you have a group, let me rewind. If you have a group of 3 students, giving them 2 person scenes and having one person always rotate and have to be the director of that scene, because then they start to see like what you're seeing from the other side, and they start to think about those things. The other thing, especially that might be hard, right, in our current situation since we're all not in rooms together, you can do that with monologue work as well. But Alyssa, you can have them, they cannot give any feedback of, I think you should do this. They always have to phrase everything with a question, and they aren't allowed to come back with an opinion in like the rebuttal or in response to what the person says. And I think if we start to have our students think in terms of questions, that will be really helpful. Especially, I mean, Alyssa, I know more, we know each other, so I know the kind of director that you are based on our conversations. And I know that you aren't like a dictator type of director. And so if they see you modeling this question asking, then they will also be able to kind of like pull on that to help them with this. So like having them do a monologue, and then the only responses can be in questions, and then the response can't be an opinion, because that's what we should be doing as directors with an asterisk. Like we do get to give our opinion sometimes. Kate, what about you? Do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to say that's where I've found a lot of success with worldview, or with an ethos, or what is their phrase, and talking after a scene about whether or not what happens during the scene supports that worldview, or does it challenge that worldview? Because oftentimes a character will change their point of view throughout the course of the show, and so seeing those moments where their character might start to question that or reaffirm what their overall worldview is, can also help. It can also help with that idea of stronger choices versus less strong choices. Like if their tactic work is really sort of ungrounded to who the character really is, asking them to go back to that benchmark of what's their worldview when they enter the play versus what's their worldview when they exit the play? Has it changed? And at what point does it change? So bringing it back to that question can oftentimes really help clarify that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Does anybody else have anything else they do in the classroom to help students like get more in that mindset? No. Okay.
I think it's important too to note that all of that work is amazing, the beat work and the tactic work, but it's a living, breathing thing that's going to change based on the human person that is your scene partner, or the invisible scene partner that you have created in a monologue. Oftentimes I'll ask my monologue students to picture the person that they're doing the scene with, like you would in a movie when they do that thing where the camera goes behind the person who's speaking shoulder and you see the reactions of the character that they're talking to. And are those reactions going to support what the tactics that you're doing, or do they cause you to switch tactics? So thinking about a live picture of somebody leaning in when you say, I love you, or do they lean away when they say, I love you? So noting that you can do all of that amazing work, but it's going to change based on the reactions of the person that you're actually on stage with or in a little box next to. And I oftentimes have them do their beat work again after working on a scene with somebody else, because it's going to clarify that those tactics have to change because the character is different than they assumed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions or any things that you guys are trying to troubleshoot at the moment specifically?
Well, I just want to chime in that I'm developing my own enrichment program that hasn't happened quite yet. So that's why I'm listening a lot to what's already happening, and what, especially if people who have been teachers in the actual school system. It's amazing. What I'm kind of gearing towards is like my students are like 10 to 13, you know, so a little bit younger. So a lot of this stuff is like, that might be over their heads. I love like when Kate brought up the whole, you know, the leading with body parts. I love that game, and doing the animal work. That's another thing. Any other either script ideas? Because I'm basically given a blank slate. Like, you could come up with anything, and it's like, great. What can I do? Like, what scripts would be good for 10 to 13? What other fun warm-up type games that really work for you, other than the ones that Kate already mentioned, to get them into that mindset of character development and script analysis?
Yeah, and Ellen, are you developing this for online, or is this going to be in person once the world?
Yeah, online. Yeah, I've been doing the class, like the company I've been working with is very much an after-school enrichment program, and that's the total different mindset from what we're having to switch to now. And I think instead of saying, okay, yeah, go ahead and do Dragons Love Tacos, you really can't do that online, because that, first of all, that book is just crazy. So you have to pick a better book that has more, you know, characters one at a time. That's one of those things. And then also, like, I was doing Perseus, like a Greek mythology with my third, fourth graders when this ended, and we only had one more rehearsal before showtime. So things like those type of scripts, I feel like I could totally tear into those different characters, because they're based on real myths, and then also what the people can bring into it. But that's the age level I'm looking into. I'm starting really from scratch. So any wisdom from anybody would be appreciated.
Yeah, if there's anybody who has ideas about scripts specifically for that age group, or any ideas, like if you are like, this is where I always am at, please comment or unmute yourselves until somebody does one of those things. Ellen, this is kind of for everybody. Have you guys seen that BB Press has now developed a musical that can be done via Zoom, and it's intended to be done that way? I'm not saying it's probably like the most like wonderful, perfect musical that's ever been written. Okay. But it is something that can be helpful. And so check out BB Press, because that's something, Ellen, and I think it's available for everyone. Oh yeah, and Don has one too. So it's in here. I haven't read that one either. That might be worth looking into. Kate, also, I would love your opinion on this, because I know you know this subject as well. But my first drama class one of my first drama classes that I taught motivation and character development using D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons, as my way into that. And as somebody who's been playing Dungeons and Dragons online a lot, since we are just stuck in houses right now, I actually think, Ellen, I don't know, Ellen, are you familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder?
You know, I had to learn it for a show called Kimberly Akimbo, but my character wasn't that interested in it, and neither was I. So I didn't really, I mean, because I've seen actually somebody is doing a class on Dungeons and Dragons for character development, and I know this person, and I was like, well, that's interesting. But I feel like people who know Dungeons and Dragons know it. So yeah, you have to really on it.
I didn't know it when I started teaching. I just was like, it was a Lord of the Rings class, and I was like, this is also nerdy. This is fine. And so I kind of made up my own, and I could try to dig and see. This is like 10 years ago. I could see if I had my lesson plan, but basically, Ellen, just like very brief, and like I'm also happy to chat with you if this is of interest. But basically what I did is I created their own character sheets for them. And they had 5 skills that were reactionary that they would do when a character would talk, or when they interacted with a character, or they would have 5 skills that would be like how they would approach a character. So like it was like reactive and active, and then we based on like, then they got like so many points, right, that they got to like assign to these different skills, and then they would I would roll dice. They would say like, okay, we want to go attack this I don't know, like this mythical creature. Okay, great. Everybody pick your reactionary, like one of your reactionaries you want to do. I'm going to roll the dice. And if it's higher than that, you get to do it. If it's lower than that, you have to improvise and come up with some other option. Like it wasn't like super D&D, but like when you're talking about Greek ideas, that could even be something that maybe would possibly work, so your students can continue to explore that, and also gives them like the space in their room to like physicalize, because that age group still like is a little bit fun in that they still will like use their bodies and aren't super self-conscious yet.
I love it. Yeah, if you could email, you have my email, so I would love it.
Yeah, let's find a time. If I can't find it, we should just like chat one-on-one. That would be fine. I'm happy to brainstorm more about that. Kate, what about you though?
I was just going to mention, if you're a part of New Play Exchange yet, New Play Exchange is a great resource for new plays that don't necessarily have a broad, a broad reach yet. And you can specify your search down to like age range, gender. You can specify ethnicity. I mean, like it's very, very specific how you can search, cast size. And I've found a lot of great new work I've found a lot of not great work, but I have found some really lovely new pieces that I've been able to integrate into my classroom that I'm able to search really specifically for it. So that's one possibility that I have. In terms of just like my favorites of that age range, I am Lindsay knows this, but I'm a huge fan of Seussical, the musical, because there are so many different characters that you can create and give them their own backstory and their own, and you're integrating that whole idea of animal into it in the first place, because they're all animals that are anthropomorphized. But I think it holds up. I'm also a big fan of, even though monologues from it are overdone, I'm a big You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown fan for the same reason. It's a great opportunity to find a lot of different characters and allow them to explore that. I'm sure I'll think of more. I'll write them in the James and the Giant Peach is another one that's great. Of course, you have to potentially deal with accents, but children that age and accents are fun.
Yeah, we don't have to be too serious about it yet.
Ellen, do you know How to Eat Like a Child? Do you guys know that one?
I have never heard
How to
of that.
Eat Like a Child? Okay. It might just be another title to explore. It's all kinds of like little scenes and monologues. And I think maybe it's a play with music. I don't know that you have to do the music, but do you have to do a performance, or are you just doing classes? And it's 10 to 13 age-wise or number of students?
Thank you for all this information and questions. 10 to 13 is the age range. Normally we do it by grade levels, but we just want to kind of give an age for this enrichment for this time. And not necessarily at the beginning to do a performance. I don't think with this particular class I can, because that would be, like being able to do a scene with somebody and put on a performance. There is another idea I have for more of an interpretive storytelling for younger kids that I think I can do like a performance, because I could keep those characters separate, and like in a Zoom, view with everybody, like a more gallery view. I think we could do that and record it and let their parents see it at the end. But I think for the older, I don't know how to do it unless anybody else knows. I wasn't thinking of a performance, but more of just doing the work, doing the table work.
Yeah.
So,
and are you planning to do like games and exercises?
Yeah, do little warm-ups.
Yeah. There's definitely been some did you find this workshop on Facebook?
I think so. Yeah.
There's
I think it
definitely a few improv groups that are sharing just like, there's tons of stuff of what games actually work on Zoom. And I've been sort of playing with finding some of them just as like the way we come together. And there's goofy things like, you pass the spoon and then the next student takes the spoon and just finding little silly games that like work in this medium. But there's a ton out there with improv. If you like search around on Facebook, you'll find some of the groups. And maybe Lindsay knows.
Yeah, I figured things are people are doing that research. Because I have all the books. I have all of those games. Like I have them in my, and then my mind is like, oh, this will work, this will work, this will work. That definitely won't work.
Anything with like where people have to like be in rhythm. Like we started one the other day. I was like, here we go. I was like, oh, nope, sorry. That did not work. It was like, you never know.
I'm even wondering like, will mirrors work?
Mirrors,
like,
perfect. Mirror, like follow the leader. That stuff's all great.
Yeah.
Steal the focus. Like that's really fun with sound and movement.
Right. Sound ball, maybe. I don't know.
Sound ball works. You just have to say the name usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ellen, are you in the teachers sharing digital resources? There's like a very long name. Do you guys know what group I'm talking about?
There's a couple of those very long name groups.
Yeah. Are you in that one, Ellen?
No, I'm really new to this enrichment teaching. I started with Stone Soup like last spring. So I was on my third quarter when everything went to a halt. So
okay.
As I go. So all of these are very helpful to me.
Yeah, I just put one in. Oh, Alyssa grabbed it too. But what I can do also is start to grab these links and add them into the recap email so people can go find them, because there's
that'd be great.
So much great resources in these groups, as long as you can sift your way through great minds, because there's a lot of garbage also. But that's the internet, right? That's how this works. Amazing. Does anybody else have any last questions or comments or thoughts about anything? Okay, great. Awesome. I just wanted to show you guys really quickly over on which window do I want? Oh, here we go. Over on ReTheater's website, we have a bunch of free resources, and just because we were talking about script and scene analysis, we have several different worksheets available that you can check out. We have Scenwork for beginning and advanced, as well as monologue analysis for beginning and advanced. This is like my favorite thing that we have over here, which is just a bunch of verbs that we've gone through the whole, like, are these verb active verbs or not? And I always like to pair verbs with adverbs so that we actually know how we are going to do the verb, or how we're going to try to achieve the verb. And I also talk about a little bit, like, on this worksheet what the charm and threaten are, but it helps us understand, like, am I trying to get someone to do this for me being nice, or am I trying to get this for them through like a threatening or dangerous action? So yeah, we have all these resources. They're totally free. I will obviously link them to you in the recap email. We also on here have a master class actually with Kate, and it's talking about character building. It's like an hour and a half, and so Kate goes a lot deeper into and I think I talked on this one, I can't remember, but she goes a lot deeper into like the outside in work that she's done, which I think a lot of the outside in work is totally going to work for us as far as like doing individual character development right now. And then finally, on here, we also have a lesson plan around dramaturgy. So if you are looking for a dramaturgy like lesson plan, this one totally will work and is something that your students can do on their own. So you can just go check out ReTheater and find that. Also, if you found this helpful, I would love to invite you to join our teacher community over on Facebook. It's a little bit different than the other ones because normally there is like a membership fee to ours because we do master classes. Kate is in there and we have several professional mentors who are there to help you problem solve and troubleshoot everything. And we do a lot of we do a lot of other enrichment through master classes and monthly like coffee chats and all that kind of stuff, but we've waived the fee through the end of June. It's on a pay what you can basis, thanks to a sponsorship from BookTix, who we love. And if you're not using BookTix, go check them out because they are like unparalleled and unmatched, I think, as far as like the whole like ticketing services go. But yeah, so if you're interested in that, I'm going to throw that information over in the chat, but we would love to help you however we possibly can. So please feel free to reach out to me. I will send a recap email with all this information. But we are honestly here. We know how hard this is for you guys, and we want to just support you through all of it. So please let us know what we can do. The other two things I'll just tack at the end. If any of you are trying to teach musical theater history, or you're interested in it, or your students are, I'm teaching a class every Thursday of this month called The Rebellious History of Musical Theater. It's pay what you can, and we're looking at the characters, creators, and stories that rebelled against convention to create musical theater that we know today. So it's not one of those boring, stuffy, like what your professor in college usually probably taught you class. So it's fun. That starts tomorrow. If you're interested, you can throw your name over in the chat or send me an email. We can get you signed up for that. And then finally, ReTheater is doing a free musical theater listening challenge for 30 days. If you are looking for something for your students to do, every day it's like a bingo sheet, and every day you go through, and it's chronological through musical theater history, and it gives you different listening challenges. So like one day I'll be like listening to Rodgers and Hammerstein. 2 days from, or tomorrow is listen to a Bob Fosse musical. Just that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for something for your students, you can find that as well. So great. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? If there's anything that we can help you with, you can unmute yourselves. I'll stick around for a little bit. But Kate, you're amazing. And I'm so glad you were here.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much, Kate. And thank all of you so much. This was so lovely. And next week we have another one of these brainstorms, and it is going to focus on stage management and costume design and wig design, which I'm super excited about. We have a wig master who has worked on cruise ships around the country and also is the head of the costume shop over at Wesleyan in Illinois. I can't remember which city in Illinois it's in. But yeah, so we'd love to have you guys join us, but if not, we wish you all the best. And so yeah, I will throw the information over in the chat, but feel free to let us know if we can help you. Otherwise, have a good rest of your night.
Yay. Thank you,
everyone.
Lindsay. Yay.
Thank you, guys. Janice, I'm sending you this over, or actually I'm putting it to everyone. Here's that stuff. So great.
Awesome. Oh, yes.
Awesome. And I'll just stick around if anybody has questions, or if you want to just talk about what's going on in your life because everything is crazy, I'll just chill for a bit.
Lindsay, where are you guys located? Or where are you located?
So I live in New York and Seattle, but I'm currently in Wisconsin.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. So most of my time in the last year has been in New York. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. But everything that we do, I was just doing this, everything that we do is online. So we never, unless you like book us to do like a come in person thing, it's always online. So yeah.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you for doing this. It was really awesome to hear you and Kate.
Oh, good.
Hope to see you again. Yeah.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah, come join us next week or in the future. We always record them and send them back out. So
Cool. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Lindsay, for the